Bear with me now, guys, because today it is 31 degrees Celsius. That's with the humidex, of course. But it is a sticky day, it is a hot day, but I was not going to miss it because it's also Monday, it's also Countdown Day. And the topic this time around, as suggested by fans, is the top 10 Transformers who could lead the Decepticons instead of Megatron. Now, there's a couple of caveats that go with this list, but that's our general topic this time around in the latest GotBot Counts Down. Hey one hail, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, your most humble of hosts, Dennis Moulton, aka GotBot. As always, please like, comment, share, of course subscribe, and while you're at it, light them up, baby. Hit that notification bell, please. It helps me out a ton, and it'll let you know when content of all sorts goes up here on the channel. Check out Machinery of Man, The Everything Factor, all the groups that I'm either a mod or an admin for, as well as all of my social media links. All of that is in the description down below. Also in the description down below. And if you're in a position to help the channel to grow, you can use the donate link. Check us out on Patreon. See what we have to offer to you through spring. Or, of course, you can hit the join button at any given time and become a channel member. Now, as I said, this is the top 10 Transformers who could lead the Decepticons besides Megatron. Couple of caveats. Caveat number one. This includes both Decepticons and Predacons. 2. I suppose it also includes bots that are non-aligned that could lead the Decepticons. 2. Anybody who is established as a former or future leader of the Decepticons or Predacons was disqualified. And since this was cross-fiction, it became pretty tangly and very, very interesting. Some characters led for very brief times, and some characters only led in specific fiction. 3. As we go through the list, as voted on by fans, you may notice that there's a couple of entries on there that actually did previously lead the Decepticons. Don't worry about it. I'm going to rectify that with a few replacements, and then at the very end we're going to see who the overall number one pick is that could lead the Decepticons that's never led the Decepticons before. And finally, caveat number 4. Just because you might lead a particular group or a particular subgroup does not mean that you led the entire Decepticon army. Does not mean that you were, say, the Emperor of Destruction, right? Those are the caveats. It was a bit of a tangly round of voting. It was an interesting one, but in essence, we're going to sort of end up with a countdown, kind of a half. You'll see what I mean. You will see what I mean as we go. But we do have our honorable mentions, and I need to mention our honorable mentions first. So who falls within that field? Hold on, I have to make sure of where it was I had them here. Okay, the first would be Scourge. Specifically, the Scourge, that would be like RID Scourge, right? The one that's a transport truck. So yeah, Scourge, sure, why not? Lockdown, specifically animated Lockdown, but again, because this is cross-fiction, just Lockdown. Sometimes depicted as a Decepticon, sometimes depicted as loosely associated, more often than not depicted as his own guy. He's a bounty hunter who does his own thing. But certainly brutal enough and certainly confident enough that he could have led the Decepticons. Dreadwing, I have to believe that this would be intended to be the Transformers Prime iteration, since, for example, the G1 Dreadwing is actually a combination of two bots, being Dreadwind and Darkwing, right? So I'm assuming that it's meant to be a Prime iteration, but the voter wasn't clear on that. But Dreadwind, why not? He was certainly a great lieutenant in Prime. He probably could have led. Yeah, he probably could have led. And he who is the governor of Polyhex, the cruel, the brutal Straxus. And yes, there are arguments for Straxus leading certain segments of Decepticons. At one point, he certainly led the Decepticons on Cybertron. But I don't think he was ever the overall leader. Still, he's a bit iffy. He definitely, though, ruled Polyhex with an iron fist. Those are the honorable mentions. The RID iteration of Scourge, Lockdown, Dreadwing, and Straxus. None of them made the actual list, so who did? You know what we're going to do? We're going to kick things off with number 10 first. Alright guys, now you're going to have to pay attention. We're going to do the exact fan vote first, okay? The way fans voted. And then when we get to the end of that, I will do the couple of caveats for a couple of guys that I happen to know were at one point deemed the leader of the Decepticons. And we will see kind of how that shifts the voted on list and who comes out as the absolutely tippy-top number one. Stick with me. But we're going to kick things off, of course, with number 10. And number 10 takes us to, I'm going to make sure that I have him handy here. Now it's this guy. Pardon me. Number 10 takes us to the G1 Seekers, but not Starscream, because Starscream would have been disqualified. There are times in fiction where he has led, and even in the 86 movie, though it was only for a hot second, he was, in essence, the leader of the Decepticons. He had a coronation and everything to make it happen. So Starscream wouldn't count, but you know who can at number 10? Skywarp. Yeah, Skywarp. And a lot of people might think, Skywarp leading the Decepticons? So here's the thing about Skywarp. One is that he looks really cool. He embodies the look of a Decepticon with the blacks and the purples and the dark colors. Two, he has the great teleporting ability that could be very, very dangerous. But three, he's kind of dumb as a stump. That's why he wouldn't lead, and I don't even know if Skywarp would aspire to lead. He's a more lowbrow. He's more low-key. He's more a thug. However, if he could somehow focus himself or somehow improve his intelligence, or, honestly, maybe if he just took the time to learn a little bit of strategy and a little bit about leadership, maybe he could be an effective leader. He has the look. He has the cool teleporting ability that could make him very dangerous. Yeah, under the right circumstances, maybe, just maybe, Skywarp could lead the Decepticons. Enough fans feel that way that he was able to take the number 10 slot. 9 is a very interesting one, because some people might argue and say, well, he was a leader, and he kind of was a leader. He was a battlefield leader, but he was doing the bidding of someone else. Who am I talking about? Overlord. Whether we talk about him kind of being non-aligned, or I guess a servant of Unicron in the Prime Wars trilogy, whether we talk about him being dangerous in the comic books, the closest he came to being like the Emperor of Destruction, like being the leader of leaders for the entire army, is being the battlefield commander in the Japanese G1 series. But even so, and as much of a danger as Overlord is, as much of a danger as Giga and Mega are, as much as they could have led the Decepticons, in essence, this guy was still doing the bidding of Devil Z, that extraterrestrial entity. I believe Devil Z even took over the body. Maybe, I can't remember if it was Devil Z or Dark Nova who took over the body of Black Zarek. I think it was Devil Z, though. But yeah, Devil Z was sort of, didn't really have a body. Devil Z was an entity that had an intelligence, but it was more like an entity that just existed. To have a physical form of a physical leader, Overlord filled the bill. But to say Overlord was the actual leader would be inaccurate. That said, had something happened to really sort of take out Devil Z, I think Overlord really could have stepped up and taken the lead, no problem. After all, we've seen that sort of happen before with certain iterations of certain characters, right? Perhaps tiptoeing on being leader, but never exactly getting there. Enough fans feel like Overlord could have, probably should have, been the overall leader of the Decepticons, that he was able to take the number 9 slot. For number 8, we go to a triple changer, one that I, quite frankly, think could have led the entire Decepticon army. Why? Because there were times that this particular character did lead certain little factions, and there was once that he even tried a coup of his own. I'm talking about Astro Train. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong. There are people who know this character better than me, but from what I can gather, the closest he ever came to being the leader was when he had the that whole god complex on that planet of slaves, and had a couple of, I think, Decepticon lieutenants there, and also triple takeover. But he didn't really lead the Decepticons. Instead, he found like a train station, and he was like basically fitting the trains to be his minions rather than the Decepticons. He showed ambition. He showed creativity. He showed intellect, and at times he has certainly shown brutality. What more could a Decepticon leader need? Astrotrain may not have been an Emperor of Destruction, but I bet he would have filled the role beautifully. Astrotrain takes the number 8 slot. Number 7 once again goes back to the Decepticon Seekers with Thundercracker. An interesting choice, and I'm surprised that Thundercracker was this high on the list. Again, I suppose it's sort of like with Skywarp. If you don't have Starscream, well then one of the other main trio would probably make sense. Here's why Thundercracker is very interesting. On the outside, the veneer of Thundercracker would probably fit because he presents himself as quite confident, quite capable, and, quite frankly, condescending. He likes to take to the sky and looks down on, really, like land-based dwellers. He likes to attack from the skies. However, he doesn't always believe in the Decepticon cause. In fact, sometimes he's downright kind of worked against it. Thundercracker is one of those that, again, he has the confidence. He could probably inspire others. He certainly has Decepticon condescension and bravado. But beneath it all, in those dark hours by himself, his heart's just not always in the job. Maybe, just maybe, the Decepticon way isn't always the right way. He could be a great leader, but that last little bit would be his Achilles heel to being an effective leader. Nevertheless, fans see leadership qualities in Thundercracker enough that he was able to take the number 7 slot. Now number 6 is an interesting one, because number 6 is Nemesis Prime. If you don't have Megatron, why not have the dark version of Optimus be your Decepticon leader? Here's the thing, and here's why I said this is interesting. Some people might have lumped Scourge in with Nemesis Prime, though, to be fair, I have seen Scourge as his own character, which is why he was in the honorable mentions and was not lumped in with the votes for this. 2, there are times, such as with the spoiler pack, where, yeah, he's labeled as a Decepticon. A lot of times he has a Decepticon insignia. Though there is precedent for him simply being a mindless alter ego of Optimus Prime. There is precedent for him just being an evil Optimus, a la The Last Knight, where it's actually Optimus. There is precedent for him being a clone of Optimus, and there is precedent for him just being a minion of Unicron. Nevertheless, silent often, brutal, definitely, vicious, absolutely, and Optimus Prime's equal in pretty much every single way. Except for the fact that Optimus would help anyone. Optimus is a father figure. This guy's just your brutal boss at work that you don't really like. But you're gonna listen to him because he also scares the heck out of you. Nemesis Prime takes the number 6 slot. And now here we are at the ever coveted, ever popular halfway mark. And at the halfway mark we have, I think, a very fitting entry on this list by way of Six Shot. I mean, how can you not make an argument for Six Shot? To be fair, one of the voters specifically said Terminus Hexatron, which I think is MMC, Make Toys. I can't remember who made that. But yeah, Six Shot. The dude is a ninja, so he's capable in hand-to-hand. He has 6 modes. He can make multiples of himself to confuse opponents. Very, very dangerous. Very, very capable. The only thing that would probably keep Six Shot from being an effective Decepticon leader is the fact that he befriends Daniel and has a soft spot for him, if I'm not mistaken. And more often than not, he prefers to be a lone wolf by himself rather than kind of in the thick of things. Nevertheless, the guy has a dangerous presence, he has a great ability, and he has almost endless modes. How can you argue with it? How can you argue with the effectiveness of Six Shot? He takes the number 5 slot. And here we are at number 4. Yes, indeed. Number 4, I think, is a great one, and yeah, it's absolutely fitting because number 4 is Tarn. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some who might say Tarn led the Decepticons, but there was a big debate and argument about it. First, he's led the Decepticon Justice Division. By the time he kind of aspired to true leadership, really he ended up just leading like a bunch of terrorist thugs more than the Decepticon army itself. Yes, he wears the insignia on his face. Yes, he has leadership experience and qualities. well-spoken, articulate, intelligent, but also cruel, brutal, vicious, and unforgiving. Perhaps the ideal Decepticon weapon. Perhaps the ideal Decepticon leader. Turn takes the number 4 slot. Ah, yes, and here we are at number 3. And number 3 is Shockwave, interestingly enough. Yeah, Shockwave. Now, I know before anybody kind of starts screaming and saying, he was leader in the Marvel UK comics. Yes, he was. So this will be an example of one of the fan-voted ones where it's pretty iffy if it applies, so I will end up removing him and replacing him with someone who definitely has not. Nevertheless, based on fan votes, Shockwave takes number 3. And you know what? I get it. He did lead whatever was left on Cybertron under Megatron's kind of loyal, under Megatron's, I guess, directives. He was loyal to him. Same sort of thing for like Transformers Prime. Like he led the science division, but he didn't really lead all of the Decepticons. And yeah, I mean, we've seen times where he's kind of went out rogue on his own. We've seen his aspirations, depending on the fiction. And there is precedent a number of times for him to lead. Nevertheless, if you are specifically looking, for example, at G1 Cartoon, then I get why you would vote for this guy. He had leadership experience. He had also served as kind of like Straxus, as like leading a faction of the group. Maybe I should say a fraction of the group, still left on Cybertron. Could he have been the overall dude, the overall leader, the big baddie himself? Maybe. I don't know how charismatic of a leader he would have been, but he certainly would have been an effective one. An excellent strategist, a keen mind, and a dangerous body. What more could you want from a leader? Yeah, enough fans feel that way that Shockwave took the number 3 slot. 2 takes us to the world of combiners, and a particular torso by way of Onslaught. Now you'll notice I have Bruticus here. I didn't take them apart to show Onslaught because a lot of people that voted, not everyone, but a lot of people that voted for Onslaught said he's a great military strategist. That's what an army needs to lead. Plus he's intelligent, plus he's well-spoken, and he is intelligent and well-spoken. He probably could give great soliloquies and great speeches that would bolster the Decepticon forces. The reason I'm showing him still as a part of Bruticus is because a lot of people that voted for him said he comes ready-made with 4 great lieutenants by way of Swindle, Brawl, Blastoff, and Vortex, right? You could have a lieutenant in charge of acquisitions, a lieutenant in charge of land forces, a lieutenant in charge of air forces, like Vortex could be the Seeker commander, right, the air commander, and even a lieutenant for space forces. He's the whole package, Onslaught and Bruticus. The whole package takes the number 2 slot. And here's where things get interesting. Fan voted number 1 is actually a tie. Exact same number of votes for, stick with me now, Soundwave and Cyclonus. 2 very loyal lieutenants. Both of these guys could easily lead the Decepticons. In fact, in some of the comic book fiction, they did. So both of these, in essence, need to be disqualified. However, again, if you are voting strictly on your exposure, for example, to the G1 cartoon, which I think a lot of people did, then Cyclonus was a lieutenant to Galvatron, and while he took a leadership role, it was still under Galvatron as the Emperor of Destruction. Same with Soundwave. While he can easily take a leadership role, and he led his cassette bots and stuff, again, he was under Megatron. But if we expand that fiction, and because this is cross-fiction and got to include everything, both of these guys do have precedent for being a Decepticon leader. So based on the fan votes, this is your tie for number 1, but that's not the whole story. Okay, so now that we've got the main list done, and maybe you're happy with that main list. Maybe you're like, man, you know what? That's in my realm. That's in my wheelhouse. I don't care about the ones that, have been leaders in other pieces of fiction and whatnot. I actually went and did some research online. I actually went and looked at some lists of recognized Decepticon leaders to try and help this. So if you're somebody, though, that looked at this and said, hey, few of those have actually been at one time or another Decepticon leader, well, let's kind of do the caveat this way. So, very first one worth noting would be at number 9, Overlord. If you are somebody who says, look, the fact that he was a battlefield commander is good enough for me to call him a leader, or if you know a piece of fiction that I don't, then we're going to replace him with who was voted next on the list. By the way, the honorable mentions did not include the alternates here, right? The alternates were actually the ones that had the next votes. So if we done, say, a top, I'll say 14, because there's actually 4 we're going to replace. If we done a top 14, these 4 would have been on it, then the honorable mentions. Hope that makes sense. So who would take kind of, a slot on the list if we didn't have Overlord on there? It would have been another Seeker by way of Thrust. And why did people vote for Thrust? Because they said, though he was not a leader himself, he was one of the more intelligent of the Seekers, and by 2008 he did have a group that he led. So he did amount to being a type of leader, just not the overall leader. Could he have been the overall leader? Given some time? Maybe. Who knows what could have or would have been. So, yes, if Overlord was out, Thrust would be in. The next questionable one, I didn't even realize when I first done this, but it would be Tarn. Because some people might say, look, yes, he led the Decepticon Justice Division, but even in something like Cyberverse, he really led what seemed to be the Decepticon army, even though that's a bit dubious. But let's just say that you're somebody who thinks to yourself, hey, Tarn was an overall leader. Well, then he would actually go replaced with, can't believe I'm going to say this one, Skyquake. I think a lot of people were thinking about the Skyquake that was the Predator leader from G1, and probably he could, or G2. I'm not sure if the Predators are G1 or G2, but maybe he could have aspired to become an overall leader. I get that. I understand that. I believe that. Now this, of course, is represented with the Legacy one, but yeah, I could get behind Skyquake. So far, if we remove Overlord and Tarn, we are kind of replacing them at the bottom of the list with Thrust and Skyquake. After number 4, we have number 3. And at number 3, this is an interesting one because, of course, we would take Shockwave out and replace it with somebody who does have aspirations to lead. Even said at one point that he felt like the day was going to come where he was going to lead. He was that confident. It's Octane. I don't know if Octane had more confidence and bravado than he should have had, or if he knew something that the rest of us didn't. Maybe he was well suited to be a leader. I don't know. Dude stole a Tripticon. There's an argument for him being effective, but there's also an argument for him being traitorous. Hard to say. But yeah, if we say that Shockwave has a case for being declared Decepticon leader, then we would remove Shockwave and we would slot in Octane. And now, if we take out Cyclonus and Soundwave at number 1, though I really think Cyclonus fits there, because here's the interesting thing. There is an argument that says that Cyclonus was like a joint leader, I think with Scourge, in the Marvel UK comics. But if you actually look at a list of Decepticon leaders, Cyclonus isn't on that list. So he's very dicey. I feel like Cyclonus probably rightfully tops the list. But let's say that you're of the camp that Cyclonus doesn't. That you know him from the comics as being an actual Decepticon top tier leader. Well, then you would replace him with the only combiner, full combiner on the list, with Predaking. Now, the Dragon Predaking from Transformers Prime had a few votes that I did lump in here. But yeah, Predaking. Razorclaw had 1 vote, and Rampage had 1 vote. But Predaking, the combiner Predaking, had a ton of votes. I get it, a fierce fighter for sure. I don't know how intelligent he is as a leader, but certainly a fierce fighter, brutal and effective on the battlefield. Big guns, big sword, big combiner. And he would slot in on the list as well. So what does that mean for an overall final list? That's a great question. Based on all of my research, as much as I could do for this, based on all of the votes, here's how the actual list, if we got rid of anybody who had like a argument, a case for potentially being seen as the Emperor of Destruction for the Decepticons, is that overall #1 guy. If we remove those, then here is kind of the final list. We would have Thrust, Skyquake, Octane, Predaking, Skywarp, Astrotrain, Thundercracker, Nemesis Prime, Six Shot, and at the tippy top #1 would be Onslaught. Onslaught would be the tippy top #1. If you are like me and think to yourself, even though there's an argument for Cyclonus being a joint leader, he's not on the official Decepticons list, then you could say at the very, very, very tippy top of who could lead the Decepticons, other than Megatron, that has not been a leader before, we would end up with Onslaught and Cyclonus. Yeah, I love it. I get it. It was a weird list. I hope you understood it. I hope you followed along. And I hope that your picks made the list. Who else got votes besides who we've already covered? Man, so many more. Lugnut, Hydra, that's a great one. I love that one. Razor Claws, I mentioned. Spinister, yes, that would have been a very interesting one. Devastator. Scrapper, of course, there's the argument for that when they were arguing aboard Astrotrain, the 86 movie. Metro Titan, loved that pick. Metro Titan. Nightbird, I thought was a very interesting one. Sparkstalker, I think he was a Firecon if I'm not mistaken. Esmerelle, don't know Esmerelle? Esmerelle was the wife of Deathsaurus. And while Deathsaurus was a leader, she was not. Leozak, which would have fallen a lot like Onslaught, right? Led that group and had a bunch of generals or lieutenants that could serve with him. Who else here had some votes? Mind Wipe, and if you don't agree, he could control your mind. There were votes for Starscream, but I couldn't count them. Triptychon, who thought that he would be a great leader, and he did think that. Who else do we have here? Slipstream, I like that one. Jetfire, even though he was only a Decepticon a short time, very, very capable. Rumble, I like that one as well. Skull Cruncher had a few votes. Striker, yes, Striker. Let's see. Arachnid, I like the Arachnid pick. Bludgeon, Motormaster. Roger, yeah, Roger voted for himself. Just saying, Roger voted for himself. Blitzwing, Dinobot, Bombshell, Waspinator. I like Waspinator as one. I get a kick out of Waspinator being one. And Collectible Kingdom also voted for himself. This was a fun one. This was an interesting one. This was a hard one to do the voting for because I'm sure you, like me, don't necessarily know all of the fiction. My wife originally wanted to vote for Shockwave. She said, I'm pretty sure he's led some stuff, man, some things. She actually voted for Soundwave because she said as far as she knew, like a lot of voters, he's never been the actual top leader tier guy. Yeah, some of this is debatable. I'm not gonna lie. I agree. If you're sitting there and you still think some of the list has been debatable, I get it. It was a challenging one. It was a different one. But at the end of the day, the very tippy top is kind of crowded with Onslaught, Soundwave, and Cyclonus. Let me know if your favorites made the list or not. I appreciate you guys coming by, giving me some of your extremely valuable time, especially for a complicated list like this. If you're in a position to help the channel to grow, please use the donate link, hit the subscribe button, hit the join button, or of course you can join us on Patreon see what we have to offer to you through spring. While you're at it, please hit the subscribe button. Stick around, have some fun with us here on the channel, and especially don't forget that somehow, someway, each and every single day, you right there, you do make a difference in the world. And I look forward to the next time that you and I get together to have another visit, either in the live streams on Thursday nights, at the stop motion premieres, or the old-fashioned way right here inside the videos.